Hello, and welcome to the Data Legos API Developer Guide, version 4.1. Today, we're going to explore how APIs and UIs integrate to power the modern applications we use every day. We will cover three main topics: the flow of data between UIs and APIs, the request-response cycle, and how APIs are used differently for web and mobile applications. Think about any app you use, like Instagram or a weather app. You see data instantly, but the app's user interface, or UI, doesn't actually store that data. The UI is simply the display. The real data comes from an API. Today, we'll learn how the UI consumes this data, the request-response cycle, and how APIs differ for web and mobile apps. The UI, or user interface, sends a request to an API whenever it needs data. The API then sends back structured data, most commonly in a format called JSON. The UI takes this data and converts it into the visual elements you see on your screen. Let's use a weather app as an example. When you open it, the UI sends a request to a weather API for the current temperature. The API responds with JSON data, like temperature, 25, condition, sunny. The UI then translates this into a clean, easy-to-read display like 25 degrees Celsius sunny. You might wonder why the data isn't stored in the UI itself. It's because data is constantly changing. APIs ensure the information is dynamic and up-to-date. This process follows a client-server model. The UI acts as the client, sending an HTTP request for data. The API acts as the server, processing the request and sending back an HTTP response with the data. In an e-commerce app, when you click Add to Cart, the UI sends a post request to an API endpoint like /cart/add. The API then replies with a response, perhaps status, success, cart_items, 3. The UI reads this and updates the display to show 3 items in cart. A common question is, how does the UI know what to ask for? The answer is that API developers provide documentation, including a list of endpoints like /cart/add, that the UI developers follow. Both web and mobile applications rely on APIs, but how they request and consume data can differ. For web apps, APIs often return lightweight HTML or JSON, optimized for browser rendering and speed. For mobile apps, APIs return structured JSON, which is optimized for limited bandwidth and smaller screens. A great example is Netflix. On a web browser, the API might send larger images and video previews. On a mobile device, the same API would likely send smaller, compressed data to conserve bandwidth. While the backend API is often the same, companies frequently design different response payloads, lightweight for mobile and richer for the web. To summarize, the UI doesn't store data, it consumes it from APIs. The request-response cycle ensures dynamic, real-time updates. Finally, APIs power both web and mobile applications, but their responses can be optimized differently for each platform. Remember, the UI is the face, but the API is the brain that makes the app come alive. Thank you for your time.